Okay, let's unpack this. We have an absolute mountain of source material here. A detailed, multi-layered report that focuses on a single event. The annual general meeting, the AGM, of the Vasanth Vihar Army Residential Welfare Association, held back on December 7, 2025.
Right.
Now, for most of us, RWA or HOA politics or something we try to avoid, they're the domain of, petty disputes, endless emails about noise, or arguments over shrubbery.
Exactly. It's usually the place where community spirit goes to die, often over a poorly funded barbecue pit or something.
But this stack of documents, it elevates RWA disputes to a case study in profound institutional accountability failure. Our source material details a spectacular breakdown of governance, financial integrity, and, well, basic adherence to the rule of law.
That's absolutely right. Our mission today is to dive deep into this specific scenario, this whole Vasanth Vihar governance fiasco, and extract the enduring critical principles of fiduciary duty, transparency, and legal compliance.
And these principles apply whenever you have a member-governed organization handling substantial sums of money, whether it's a neighborhood association or, a corporate board.
We're going to understand how things went so wrong, and maybe more importantly, why they went wrong.
And the most stunning revelation, the absolute core conflict that just permeates this entire report and makes it legally significant, it's not a financial number.
Yeah.
It's procedural.
Mm-hmm.
It's the systemic suppression of member objections from the official AGM minutes.
It's a cover-up by editing, essentially. I mean, the leadership took detailed, written, pre-submitted dissent and just scrubbed it from the official record of the meeting.
Wow.
This act of omission fundamentally transforms the minutes into a misleading document. It creates a lie just by leaving out the truth.
So on paper, it looks like a smooth, rubber-stamped meeting where everything was approved unanimously.
Yeah.
But in reality, it was a meeting just fraught with profound, documented conflict.
And that matters so much because when the official legal record of an organization is manipulated in this way, every single resolution passed during that meeting becomes vulnerable.
It's a legal time bomb.
It is a huge one.
And when you look at the entire scope of the source material, it's not just one flaw, it's a systemic failure. We're dealing with 4 massive areas of contention that we need to dissect today.
Okay.
First, those suppressed objections we just mentioned. Second, the passing of audited accounts that were heavily contested. Third, major unauthorized transfers of funds. And fourth, a foundational challenge.
A big one.
Yeah, a foundational challenge regarding whether the governing body even had the legal authority, the ultra-vires issue, to collect those fees in the first place.
It is a trifecta of failure. Procedural negligence, financial opacity, and statutory noncompliance. We're going to unpack the details to show you exactly how this technique of suppression by omission was used and what the catastrophic cascading risks are for everyone involved.
For the homeowners who lost their voice, and for the office bearers who took decisions under this cloud of illegitimacy. Let's start right at the top then. Let's focus on what the report pinpoints as the central intentional failure, the systemic omission of objections from those official AGM minutes. The ones that were circulated about a month later, on January 5, 2025.
Right.
What did the report mean when it characterized this as suppression by omission?
It means they actively chose to erase the evidence of conflict. The minutes weren't just, poorly drafted, they were surgically edited. The leadership presented this clean narrative that showed the treasurer's report was accepted and the accounts were passed.
Simple.
Clean.
Tidy.
Very. But what they left out was the fact that there were prior written objections filed by members. And these objections raised serious red flags concerning governance, fiduciary breaches, and statutory noncompliance.
So these weren't just, random questions from the floor during the meeting. These were formal, documented challenges that, by rights, should have been part of the discussion docket. Precisely. And the scale of the exclusion is what makes this a governance failure, not just some administrative error. When you look at what was left out, it's everything that constitutes due process.
Like what? What specifically was missing?
Well, the general body, so the voting membership, they were given no record of a summary of the substantive objections. There was no Q&A session on the issues raised. They didn't table any written responses to address the allegations. Nothing.
And this is key. They didn't even record the option of deferral.
Not at all. A responsible governing body, when you're faced with serious documented objections to your audited accounts, you have a fiduciary duty to say, wait a minute, hold on. We will defer approval pending an external review or some clarification.
Of course.
But the minutes show zero consideration of deferring the approval of the accounts. The approval was simply recorded, which effectively makes the dissent irrelevant retroactively.
Okay, let me challenge this for a moment. Let me play devil's advocate from the perspective of the leadership.
Go.
If the resolution passed overwhelmingly anyway, say 90% of members voted in favor, does it really matter if the objections of that 10% were left out of the minutes? Isn't majority rule paramount?
That is a critical question, and the answer is absolutely yes, it matters deeply. And it matters because it violates two foundational legal principles.
Okay.
The first is procedural fairness and natural justice. The majority's vote is only legally valid if it is an informed vote. If the leadership intentionally hides material facts that question the legality of the accounts or the very power of the association, they have deprived the members of their right to natural justice.
So an uninformed majority vote is a legally compromised vote.
Exactly. It's like rigging the information feed before an election, even if the election itself seems democratic on the surface.
I see. And the second principle?
The second principle violated is fiduciary duty. Fiduciary duty is, just a fancy legal term for trust. When members give the leadership their money and authority, they place their trust in them to act in the members' best interests. Part of that duty is maintaining a truthful legal record.
And by intentionally creating a record that masks conflict.
The office bearers failed in their legal promise to the members. They broke that trust.
So the core risk here is that this act of paper trail suppression doesn't just annoy the dissenting members, it actually exposes the entire organization to legal peril.
The risk profile skyrockets. Any resulting resolution, whether it's approving the budget, the new fees, or the past accounts, becomes highly vulnerable to challenge in a tribunal or a court.
How so?
A challenger can simply show the judge the pre-submitted written objection and then show the AGM minutes that omit it, proving that the leadership misled the general body. That intentional omission is enough to argue that the approvals are voidable.
For our listeners, whether you run a small business, sit on a nonprofit board, or just pay dues to a club, this is the vital takeaway about institutional memory, isn't it?
The minutes are the legal memory of the institution. They are the cornerstone of accountability. If the minutes are pristine and show 100% agreement, but the truth is that the issues were deliberately suppressed, then that organization has lost its capacity for self-correction.
Right. You can't hold someone accountable for something that, according to the official record, never even happened.
That's it. The integrity of the minutes protects all members, even the ones who voted yes, because it ensures that leadership can't just hide negligence or wrongdoing behind procedural perfection.
So the procedural failure, the deliberate silencing, was, of course, the necessary mechanism to mask the financial rot beneath. Now we move into Section 2, the financial integrity crisis, where we look at the specific concerns the members were actually raising.
Right. This is where we shift from process crimes to allegations of, serious financial mismanagement. The first major red flag stems from the simple act of passing of contested audited accounts for FY 2024-25.
The minutes, as we noted, make this sound clean. Treasurer presents, proposer seconder, passed, case closed.
But the reality, according to our source material, is that this approval ignored pre-submitted objections that were not aimed at minor clerical errors. They specifically cited serious governance and fiduciary irregularities.
So it wasn't about whether they spent, $50 too much on cleaning supplies.
No. This was a fundamental challenge to the entire financial structure and the leadership's honesty.
If the accounts are being challenged on integrity grounds, what specific details were missing that would make the accounts unauditable for a regular member?
Yeah.
That's where it gets a bit complex. What are these audit trail gaps?
This is where we need to slow down a little and define the key elements of basic financial transparency. The report identifies a failure to provide some really fundamental accountability elements. First, a serious lack of narration for major fund movements. Think of narration as the story attached to every large transaction. If $100,000 moves out of the account, the narration must clearly state, payment for Phase 2 renovation as per contract XYZ, authorized by Resolution 45.
But if that story is missing or vague,
the transaction is unverifiable.
It allows the money to just vanish into a category called miscellaneous.
Precisely. Furthermore, there was an absence of fund-wise explanations and missing traceability for transactions. But the most damning omissions, highlighted by the members' requests, were the missing supporting documents, which are essential for independent verification.
Let's break down those missing documents one by one, because this really shows the difference between a real audit and just a clean-looking ledger. What's the function of these documents?
Let's start with supporting schedules. The audited account gives you a total number, say, maintenance expense, 50 lakh rupees. The supporting schedule is the breakdown, who was paid, when, what service, the invoice number. Without the schedule, you can't verify if that number is legitimate or just inflated.
Okay, that makes sense.
Next, bank confirmations. This is crucial. The leadership can say the RWA has 2 crore in cash in the bank. The bank confirmation is a letter sent directly from the bank to the auditor, verifying that the cash physically exists.
And this prevents leadership from presenting an inflated cash balance, which is a key tactic in ledger fraud.
Exactly. So if the leadership won't provide that third-party confirmation, you simply can't trust the number.
Got it. What's next?
Then we have the investment register. If the RWA is managing large long-term capital, they need to show exactly where that money is invested. Is it in government bonds? High-risk stocks? Members have a right to know where their future funds are being held.
And the last one.
And finally, utilization statements. These show how earmarked funds money collected for a specific project were actually spent against the budget for that project. If they collected 50 lakh for a new clubhouse, the utilization statement proves it went toward the clubhouse, not, say, operational salaries.
And the minutes failed to record any demand for these 4 critical elements, which suggests they simply rammed the approval through without allowing members to perform even basic due diligence.
Which leads to the risk of opacity. When you have a financial system that lacks narration, traceability, and external confirmation, you have created the perfect breeding ground for misclassification or misuse of funds.
You can't follow the money trail.
And if you can't follow the money trail, the system is fundamentally broken and that fiduciary duty is irrevocably breached.
That sets the stage for the second red flag, which involves the manipulation of specific categories of money, unauthorized interfund transfers. This deals with the concept of earmarked funds. Can you clarify the distinction between these different types of funds the RWA was managing?
Yeah, this is a sophisticated point of community finance. Most RWAs break down the fees they collect into specialized categories, and each category has a specific purpose. You'll typically have your operational maintenance fund for daily expenses like security and cleaning.
The day-to-day stuff.
Right. Then you have longer-term funds, like the sinking fund, which is collected specifically for future large capital expenses, replacing the elevator, fixing the roof, a major overhaul 15 years down the line.
Think of the sinking fund like a dedicated college savings plan. You can't touch it.
Precisely. You can't touch that money for groceries. Then you might have project funds for a specific ongoing development and corpus or assets funds for long-term endowments or money tied up in physical assets.
And the crucial principle here is
purpose limitation. Money collected for Fund A must be used for Purpose A, period.
And the objection here alleges that the leadership was illegally diverting money between these categories, say, taking money from the sinking fund to cover operational shortfalls.
That's the core allegation. The diversion of designated money, particularly from specialized funds like the sinking fund, violates purpose limitation. Even if the money stays within the RWA's total bank account, it is a breach of trust because the members paid that fee with the explicit understanding of its future use.
But doesn't that just sound like bad internal accounting? Why is it a legal violation?
Because it exposes the organization to severe legal challenges. Imagine a member pays, say, 5 lakh into the sinking fund over 10 years, expecting that money to be there for the roof replacement. If the leadership secretly used that money to, say, pay inflated salaries or cover deficits in the operational fund,
they have essentially stolen the future stability of the association.
Exactly. And what do the minutes say about why these transfers happened?
Let me guess. Nothing.
Utter silence. The minutes offer no explanation for past transfers, no reconciliation report detailing which funds were affected and by how much, and no reference to any prior minuted resolution that might have authorized such a change in purpose.
And that silence confirms the lack of accountability.
It suggests these transfers were conducted unilaterally, completely outside the general body's knowledge. The risk here is acute exposure to breach of trust claims. Since the office bearers acted as fiduciaries and misused earmarked funds, they could face significant personal and organizational liability.
This brings us to the most spectacular, contentious, and potentially devastating financial issue in this entire deep dive. The mystery of the INR 52.7 lakh receipt. We are talking about 5.27 million Indian rupees, a massive single transaction that just appears in the accounts.
This is the financial black hole in the report. This receipt is recorded simply as refund of project money. Now, that is a large enough sum that, in an organization of this size, it should have been the subject of a major presentation, a debate, maybe even a celebration.
Instead, it was given a bland, single-line classification to just blend in.
Right.
But the pre-submitted objections weren't bland. They strongly disputed this classification, alleging something far more serious than a routine refund.
Yes, the source material alleges that this refund of project money is a deliberate false classification. The allegation is that this receipt actually masks an illegal monetization or sale of common area property.
Wow.
So imagine this RWA quietly sold off a portion of the community park or monetized a strip of land that belonged to all homeowners and then called the proceeds a refund to bury it in the accounts.
That dramatically changes the nature of the alleged wrongdoing. We're moving from mismanagement to potentially criminal activity involving the shared assets of the entire community.
It is the difference between a bookkeeping error and the disposal of core assets without consent. And what is staggering is the degree of omission in the AGM minutes regarding this massive disputed transaction.
Total silence, despite repeated, documented requests for clarification.
The general body was given zero information, no details on the nature of the transaction, no disclosure of the legal agreement or contract that facilitated the refund, no supporting documentary evidence, nothing.
They just let it pass.
The office bearers allowed it to pass as part of the accounts, hoping that the sheer volume of other agenda items would ensure its silence.
This connects back to the fundamental rights of every single homeowner in that community.
Absolutely. When you buy into a community, your ownership includes an undivided joint interest in the common areas, the land, the shared infrastructure. The governing body does not own these assets. They manage them on behalf of the members.
So they cannot dispose of shared assets without explicit, lawful resolution and documented consent.
They can't. And if the source allegation is true, that this was an illegal sale, the risk is truly extreme.
How extreme?
It's existential. If they illegally disposed of shared assets, the exposure is comprehensive. Severe civil liability for breach of contract and trust, potential criminal allegations for fraud and false classification, and guaranteed regulatory scrutiny.
So this isn't just about losing membership fees anymore.
Not at all. This is about potentially losing shared property and destroying the legal standing of the entire organization. The deliberate silence in the minutes on a transaction of this magnitude is perhaps the loudest indictment of the entire governance failure.
Okay, so we've covered the deliberate cover-up and the alleged financial crimes that were covered up. Now we shift our focus to the very legal foundation upon which this RWA was operating, because even the most basic power of the association is being compromised here.
That's right.
This is Section 3, questioning the foundation, legal authority, and flawed decisions.
And this challenge is crucial because it suggests that the RWA might not just be running its accounts badly, it might be operating outside the law entirely. The first objection is the ultra-virus challenge regarding the legality of collecting maintenance and common charges, or MMC.
Ultra-virus, that's Latin for beyond the powers.
Right.
Can you break down this concept for our listeners?
Sure. If you are an organization, you are created by a founding document, a charter, a memorandum, a statute. That document defines what you can do. If you act outside of that defined authority, your action is ultra-virus. It's legally null and void.
Okay.
The core legal objection raised here is that the governing body's authority to collect and manage large funds like the MMC is contested. It's contested because the association may lack the proper statutory framework or formal legal registration required by applicable laws to function as a legitimate fiduciary body.
So if they are not properly registered, or if their charter doesn't specifically grant them the right to collect mandatory, potentially large fees, then every fee they have collected is potentially invalid.
Precisely. It's a foundational challenge. It's not about how well they spent the money. It's about whether they had the legal right to demand it in the first place. This goes far beyond neighborhood squabbles and enters the realm of statutory competence.
And yet, how did the AGM, faced with this fundamental threat to its very existence, proceed?
It ignored it, just like the financial allegations. The AGM proceeded as if its authority was guaranteed. The minutes record no discussion, no legal basis, and critically, no formal legal opinion being tabled to address the dispute.
They just treated a question about their fundamental legitimacy as if it were, I don't know, a procedural noise.
That's it. But ignoring the challenge actually puts the office bearers themselves at massive personal risk.
How so?
It exacerbates the risk tenfold. This violates what's called the rule of law requirement. If resolutions were passed and financial liabilities were incurred under this cloud of doubt, those resolutions may be declared invalid retroactively.
And the personal risk?
The personal risk is, if office bearers acted outside their legal mandate, They could face personal exposure for the liabilities incurred or funds collected without proper authority. They acted as fiduciaries under a non-existent or compromised legal mandate.
Moving from the foundation to specific policies, the report flags what many associations try to do. Discriminatory and unjustified tenant charges, often called a tenant premium or a surcharge.
Yeah, this is a common pain point in community living. The RWA discussed and passed surcharges and differential fees specifically for tenants and leaseholders, basically making them pay more than the resident owners.
What's the legal problem with asking tenants to pay a bit more for using the facilities?
The legal objection is that differential charges like this, if they're arbitrary, they violate property rights, lease rights, and the core principle of equality. To be lawful, any differential charge must be demonstrably tied to the actual quantifiable costs incurred by the association because of the tenant's occupancy.
So, for example, if tenants use the community pool significantly more, and that raises the chemical costs, you could potentially justify a proportional increase.
Right, but you cannot simply charge a blanket 25% premium just because they rent. That's discriminatory.
And the procedural failure in adopting these charges was, again, a lack of homework and transparency.
Absolutely. The minutes record the charge being adopted, but they completely omit any justification. There was no legal reasoning recorded, no proportionality analysis showing why the specific surcharge amount was necessary, and no rights impact assessment to ensure it didn't breach local non-discrimination rules or existing lease agreements.
So without that rationale, the association has essentially handed its members and tenants grounds for litigation.
Immediate exposure to litigation and discrimination claims. It highlights a universal rule. Any levy imposed by a governing body has to be rational, transparent, and firmly rooted in a lawful justification, not just arbitrary policy preference. If you can't prove the cost, you can't charge the fee.
Our last specific governance failure is a bizarre procedural lapse that speaks volumes about accountability. The approval of major fee hikes based on an unsigned PowerPoint report.
This is where we see a complete collapse of formality. The AGM adopted significant revisions to the MMC rates, set to take effect in April 2026. These revisions were based on recommendations from an MMC review committee.
And if you're going to raise rates, you need to show your work. What was the work they showed?
The only thing circulated to members before the vote was a set of unsigned PowerPoint slides.
You're kidding me.
I'm not. And this is a critical distinction. A signed governance-grade report, one that holds the committee members accountable, was never tabled. It lacked their names, their terms of reference, the underlying data sheets used for the calculation, and the legal basis for the recommendation.
So the members were asked to vote on a massive financial change based on an editable, non-legal presentation slide.
That's the reality. In a governance context, the difference between a PowerPoint slide and a signed report is massive. A PowerPoint is a presentation. A signed report is a binding commitment.
And without a signed document, there's no accountability.
None. You have no accountability attributed to the committee members. If the calculations are flawed or the rates are arbitrary, the committee can simply say, oh, that wasn't the final version because it was never formalized.
So this violates the twin principles of non-arbitrariness in levies and informed consent.
Precisely. You cannot levy a mandatory financial charge on members without a full disclosure of the evidence and the methodology. The general body must have sufficient, high-quality information to assess the validity of the fee hike. By failing to table the signed report and the underlying data, the RWA ensured the members could not give informed consent.
Which makes the entire approval process challengeable and the new levies highly suspect. We have documented institutional failure on 3 fronts: procedural fraud, financial opacity, and legal vulnerability. The report doesn't stop there, though. It provides a comprehensive roadmap for restoration. This is Section 4. The necessary steps to bring legality and trust back to this organization.
Right. The first steps have to target that core procedural failure we identified at the very beginning. You have to correct the historical record.
How do you fix a minute book that was intentionally misleading?
You must formally rectify the December 7, 2025 minutes and do it immediately. This isn't just an informal note. It requires a formal resolution in a subsequent meeting.
And what must that rectification include?
The rectification must specifically record the receipt of the written objections and, this is non-negotiable, annex the full text of those objections as an appendix to the minutes. The suppressed material must become part of the permanent legal memory of the organization.
And what about the status of the accounts that were approved under these conditions?
They have to be suspended. A formal correction, a corrigendum, must be issued immediately. stating that the approval of the FY 2024-25 accounts is provisional. It is subject to further independent review and the full resolution of the serious objections raised.
So you can't rely on a vote that was demonstrably compromised by incomplete information.
Not at all. The reliance on those accounts for any major financial or policy decision has to cease immediately.
Okay, so the accounts can't just be fixed with a fresh vote. The report lays out strict conditions precedent before the accounts can ever be considered approved again. What are those mandatory disclosure requirements?
The focus shifts from voting to disclosure. The accounts must only be retabled after a point-by-point written response to every single objection is issued to the entire membership. No more silence. The leadership has to answer the questions publicly and formally.
And the centerpiece of this disclosure must be that INR 52.7 lakh entry.
Absolutely non-negotiable. Full disclosure must be made on that contentious receipt. That means its exact nature, the legal basis for the transaction. Was it a sale? A lease? And all supporting documentation. We're talking contracts, conveyance deeds, correspondence.
So if it involves the sale of common property, the members need full visibility and legal proof.
Yes, and they have to fix the issue of the inter-fund transfers. A complete fund-wise reconciliation and a clear narration explaining the movement of all inter-fund transfers must be circulated in advance. Until the money is accounted for, traced, and justified, the membership cannot responsibly reapprove the finances.
This level of transparency is what's mandatory to rebuild trust.
It's the only way.
So when the problems are this deep allegations of asset sales and governance fraud, a regular, friendly auditor just isn't enough. The report calls for heavy hitters.
You need external, unbiased eyes with a very specific mandate. The association must commission an independent special or forensic audit.
Okay, what's the difference? A standard audit just confirms the book's balance according to the receipts provided.
Exactly. A forensic audit is a deep dive investigation. It is specifically looking for fraud, malfeasance, unauthorized transactions, and statutory noncompliance. It must specifically examine the interfund transfers, that extraordinary receipt of INR 52.7 lakh, and the general statutory compliance of all fund usage.
So this moves the process from accounting review to fraud investigation.
Correct. It provides the necessary objectivity to address the systemic issues the previous leadership allegedly masked. And complementing the financial scrutiny, we need legal clarity on the ultravirus question.
The very question of their right to levy fees in the first place.
They must obtain a formal, written legal opinion from an external, unbiased counsel about the association's statutory authority to levy MMC and tenant charges. That opinion has to be clear, unambiguous, and placed on the public record for all members to review.
And if they lack the legal mandate,
the organization must take immediate steps to regularize its status or cease acting as a governing body. The membership has the right to know if they're operating within the bounds of the law.
And before the auditors and lawyers even set foot in the door, there's a vital directive regarding evidence preservation.
Record preservation is paramount. A directive must be issued to preserve all related records. Financial statements, banking records, contracts, committee correspondence, without any alteration or destruction. This protects the integrity of the evidence trail.
So when the forensic audit begins, the necessary data is intact and unaltered for future regulatory scrutiny.
That's the goal.
Finally, restoration isn't complete without systemic fixes. What structural changes must be implemented to prevent this suppression by omission from ever happening again?
This requires baking transparency into the DNA of the association. You need mandatory safeguards.
Like what?
First, mandatory docketing and tracking for all member submissions. If a member sends an objection or a question, it must be logged, given a tracking number, and assigned a specific response timeline. No member communication should be allowed to just disappear into an ignored email folder.
And second,
the rule of compulsory minuting of all objections and dissent in general body meetings must be adopted and strictly enforced. If a member raises a question or objects to a resolution, it must be recorded in the minutes before the vote is taken.
This essentially makes submission a clear, documented violation itself.
Absolutely. And third, they need to regularly publish an action tracker. This is a document that shows the disposition of all objections, inquiries, and compliance items, allowing members to follow the progress of their concerns.
And no more approvals based on presentation software.
Correct. The report recommends that no approval of levies or major financial decisions should ever occur without the formal annexing of all underlying signed governance-grade evidence. The decisions must be based on accountable reports, not unsigned PowerPoint slides, ensuring the principles of non-arbitrariness and informed consent are always upheld.
So what does this all mean for you? We dove into the Dissent RWA, exploring everything from a procedural cover-up to, well, allegations of illegally selling common property. The specific irregularities, the suppressed minutes, the suspicious INR 52.7 lack receipt, the fundamental ultra-vires risk all serve as a powerful case study in the failure of fiduciary duty within community organizations.
The central lesson, I think, is that managing millions of members' funds, even at the hyperlocal level, requires the same rigor, the same legal compliance, and the same absolute financial transparency as a multinational corporation.
Right, and the complexity of the sources, with all the financial jargon, it initially obscures the problem.
It does.
But the true genius of the report is that it cuts through that information overload to highlight the critical truth. The most serious issues were not hidden in the details that were shared about landscaping contracts or security budget.
No. They were hidden in the serious, inconvenient facts that were deliberately not recorded. The things left silent.
Transparency is often misused, isn't it? It's not just about sharing a mountain of documents. It's about sharing the critical information.
It's about sharing the information that allows members to question, to challenge, and to hold leadership accountable. When that mechanism for challenge is intentionally broken by omission, institutional trust is destroyed.
The report's conclusion is stark. It says that until these comprehensive corrective steps are taken, the forensic audit, the legal opinion, the rectification of the minutes, the proceedings remain procedurally defective, governance deficient, and vulnerable to regulatory, judicial, and member challenge.
Illegality doesn't just fade away with time, it must be actively undone.
It's a powerful reminder that an organization's worst enemy isn't always external. Sometimes it's the internal temptation to prioritize expediency and convenience over legal truth.
Well said.
And that leaves us with our final provocative thought for you, the listener. The next time you review the minutes or a report for any organization that holds your trust and manages your money, be it a corporate board, a nonprofit, or your own community association, don't just focus on the facts they present. Ask yourself, what is missing? In any organization, where's the most vulnerable point for a lack of accountability? The things that are clearly recorded and debated, or the things that are deliberately not recorded, hidden by the tactic of suppression by omission? That silence is often the loudest indicator of institutional failure.